I was standing in my driveway in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, staring at an empty lot where my house should have been, and the only thing I could think was that I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. But the mailbox with my address was still there, standing like a gravestone next to a pile of rubble and wood fragments that used to be my 3-bedroom ranch home. My name is Derek Quinlan, and I had just returned from a 2-week vacation in Costa Rica. I had left my comfortable home in the Sunset Ridge Estates community on May 15th, looking forward to surfing, relaxation, and completely disconnecting from the world. I had turned off my phone for most of the trip, wanting to enjoy the digital detox everyone keeps talking about. That decision was about to become the worst mistake of my life. I pulled my rental car closer, thinking maybe the heat was getting to me. It was late May in Arizona after all, and the temperature was pushing 95 degrees. But no, the scene remained the same. Where my house had stood for the past 15 years was nothing but foundation, scattered debris, and tire tracks from heavy machinery. My neighbor's house stood untouched to the left. The empty lot that had been for sale for months sat to the right. But mine, gone. I got out of the car slowly, my legs shaking. My suitcase fell out behind me, hitting the concrete driveway that led to nowhere now. Everything I owned had been in that house: my father's vintage record collection, my college degree, photos of my late mother, the custom furniture I had spent years collecting, all of it gone. "What the hell happened here?" I shouted to no one in particular. My neighbor, Tom Richardson, came running out of his house. He was a retired accountant in his 70s, and his face was pale as he approached me. "Derek? Oh my God, Derek, I tried to call you. I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen to me," Tom said, his hands shaking as he grabbed my arm. "Stop who? Tom, what happened to my house?" I demanded, my voice rising with each word. "The HOA. They demolished it. They said it was the condemned property, but I told them they had the wrong house. I told them your house wasn't the one scheduled for demolition. But that woman, Patricia, she insisted they had the right address." Patricia. Patricia Morrison. The name alone made my blood pressure spike even before this nightmare. She was the HOA president of Sunset Ridge Estates, a woman in her mid-50s who treated the homeowners association like her personal fiefdom. She had been a thorn in my side since I had moved here, constantly sending violation notices for the most ridiculous things. My grass was half an inch too tall. My car was parked 3 inches over my driveway line. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. "Patricia Morrison authorized this?" I asked, my voice deadly calm now. "She was here supervising the whole thing. She had a demolition crew here last week." I came out and told them this was Derek Quinlan's house, not the property at 847 Desert View Drive. They're at 843 Desert View Drive. But she pulled out some paperwork and said the county had condemned this property and authorized demolition. I even showed them my own house number to prove they were at the wrong address, but she told me to mind my own business or she would fine me for harassment. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling with rage. I had dozens of missed calls and voicemails, but I had been ignoring them during my vacation, thinking they could wait. Now I scrolled through them. 7 calls from Tom, 3 from the HOA office, 5 from numbers I did not recognize. I played the voicemail from Tom first. "Derek, this is Tom from next door. Please call me as soon as you get this. The HOA is at your house with a demolition crew. They're saying they're going to tear it down. I think there's been some kind of mistake. Please call me back immediately." The timestamp was from 8 days ago. The next voicemail was from a number I did not recognize. A professional voice spoke. "This message is for the property owner at 843 Desert View Drive. This is Martinez Demolition Services, calling to confirm the scheduled demolition of the structure on your property for May 20th at 8 a.m. If you have any questions, please call our office." My address. They had said my address, but they were supposed to demolish a different property. I played the voicemail from the HOA office. Patricia Morrison's nasal voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Quinlan, this is Patricia Morrison, president of the Sunset Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. We have been informed by the county that your property has been condemned due to structural violations and unpaid fines. As per HOA bylaws section 14.3, we are authorized to proceed with demolition to maintain community standards. The demolition is scheduled for May 20th. If you wish to contest this, you must appear before the HOA board before that date. Have a nice day. I stood there, phone in hand, trying to process what I was hearing. Condemned, structural violations, unpaid fines. None of this made any sense. My house had been perfectly fine. I had no unpaid fines. I had never received any notice of condemnation. "Tom, did you see them demolish it?" I asked. "I saw the whole thing. I took videos on my phone. I thought you might need them." "Derek, I'm so sorry. I tried everything I could think of, but Patricia threatened to have me removed from the property if I interfered. She even called the police at one point, but they said it was a civil matter and left." "Send me those videos right now," I said, "and then I need to know exactly where Patricia Morrison lives." Tom pulled out his phone and started texting me the video files. "Derek, I know you're angry, but don't do anything stupid. Get a lawyer. This is a legal battle." "Oh, I'm getting a lawyer," I said. "But first I'm going to hear what that woman has to say for herself." I got back in my car and drove 3 streets over to the house I knew belonged to Patricia Morrison. It was a large 2-story colonial, immaculately maintained with a manicured lawn that looked like it belonged on a golf course. Her silver Lexus was in the driveway. I parked behind it, blocking her in, and marched up to the front door. I rang the doorbell 3 times in rapid succession and then started knocking. After a moment, the door opened and Patricia Morrison stood there in yoga pants and a designer athletic top, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She looked at me with that expression of disdain she always wore when dealing with homeowners she considered beneath her. "Mr. Quinlan, you're back from your trip," she said flatly. "You demolished my house," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "You demolished my entire house while I was gone." I followed proper procedure. The property at 843 Desert View Drive was condemned by the county due to multiple structural violations and unpaid association fees. As HOA president, I am authorized to take necessary action to maintain community standards. My house was not condemned. I have no structural violations. I have no unpaid fees. You demolished the wrong property, Patricia. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed her face. Uncertainty, maybe, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual arrogance. "I have all the proper documentation. The county condemnation notice clearly states 843 Desert View Drive." "Show me," I demanded. She disappeared into her house for a moment and returned with a folder. She pulled out a document and handed it to me. I scanned it quickly, and my suspicion was confirmed immediately. "Patricia, this says 847 Desert View Drive, not 843. You demolished the wrong house." She snatched the paper back and looked at it, her eyes widening slightly. "That's a typo. The property description matches yours." "Read the property description out loud," I said. She cleared her throat. "Lot 23, corner property, adjacent to community green space, 2-story structure with attached garage. My house is Lot 17, middle of the block, ranch style with a detached garage. You demolished the wrong house and you know it." Patricia's face was turning red now. "Even if there was an administrative error, you still had unpaid violations that warranted action." "What violations? I want to see documentation of every single violation you claim I had." "I don't have to stand here and be interrogated in my own home. If you have a problem with HOA actions, you can file a formal complaint and it will be addressed at the next board meeting in 3 weeks. 3 weeks? You demolished my entire house and you want me to wait 3 weeks for a board meeting? Everything I own was in that house. 15 years of my life gone because you couldn't read an address correctly." "I'm closing this door now, Mr. Quinlan. If you continue to harass me, I'll call the police." "Call them," I said. "Please. Call them right now so they can document that you admitted to demolishing my property." She hesitated, and I could see her mind working, realizing that she might have made a serious mistake. But instead of admitting it, she did what people like Patricia always do. She doubled down. "You can take this up with the HOA board. Good day." She closed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, trying to control the rage that was threatening to overwhelm me. Then I pulled out my phone and called the first lawyer I could find in Phoenix who specialized in property law. The call went to a receptionist. Law offices of Henderson and Associates, how may I help you? I need to speak to a lawyer immediately. The HOA demolished my house while I was on vacation, and they demolished the wrong property entirely. There was a pause. I'm sorry, did you say they demolished your house? Yes, the entire structure is gone. I just got back from a 2-week vacation and there's nothing but rubble where my home used to be. Please hold. I waited, staring at Patricia's closed door, imagining all the things I wanted to say to her. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes, a man's voice came on the line. This is Robert Henderson. I understand you have an unusual situation. I explained everything as clearly as I could, from coming home to an empty lot to the conversation I had just had with Patricia Morrison. Henderson listened without interrupting. Mr. Quinlan, I'm going to need you to come to my office immediately. Bring any documentation you have regarding your property ownership, any HOA correspondence, and those videos your neighbor took. This is one of the most egregious cases I have heard in 20 years of practice. Can you be here within the hour? I'll be there in 30 minutes. I drove back to my non-existent house and met with Tom again. He transferred all the videos he had taken to my phone. Watching them made me feel sick. The footage showed a demolition crew arriving early in the morning on May 20th. Patricia Morrison was there with a clipboard, pointing at my house and directing the crew. Tom's video included audio of him shouting that they had the wrong house, and Patricia's response, Mr. Richardson, this is official HOA business. Return to your property or I will have you cited for interference. Then, the video showed the excavator tearing into my home, my living room wall coming down, my roof caving in, my bedroom, where I had slept for 15 years, crushed and loaded into a dump truck. The whole process took about 6 hours. By the evening of May 20th, my house was completely gone. I saved all the videos and then went back to my rental car to grab my documents. I always kept my property deed and important papers in a fireproof safe, which I had taken with me on vacation because it also contained my passport and other travel documents. Thank God for that habit. The law office of Henderson and Associates was in downtown Phoenix in a modern glass building. Robert Henderson turned out to be a man in his 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He watched Tom's videos 3 times, examined all my documents, and then sat back in his chair. Mr. Quinlan, this is about as clear-cut a case as I have ever seen. The HOA demolished the wrong property. They had a condemnation order for 847 Desert View Drive, not 843. The property description does not match your home in any way, and they proceeded despite being told by multiple witnesses that they had the wrong address. So what do? I asked. First, we file an emergency injunction to freeze all HOA assets. We cannot have them hiding money or claiming poverty when it comes time to pay damages. Second, we file a lawsuit against the HOA, Patricia Morrison personally, and the demolition company. Third, we contact your insurance company and the media. This is the kind of story that news outlets love, and public pressure will help our case. How much is this going to cost me? Henderson smiled grimly. Given the strength of this case, I will take it on contingency. I get 30% of whatever we recover, which I assure you will be substantial. You are entitled to the full replacement value of your home and all its contents, plus damages for emotional distress, loss of use, and punitive damages for gross negligence. We are talking millions of dollars, Mr. Quinlan. I don't care about millions of dollars. I care about my mother's photos, my father's records, things that can't be replaced. I understand, but making them pay is the only justice available to you now. Are you ready to move forward? Absolutely. Henderson started making calls immediately. Within 2 hours, we had filed an emergency motion with the court to freeze HOA assets. We also filed a lawsuit seeking $15 million in damages. Henderson then contacted 3 different news stations and gave them the basic outline of the story. By 7 that evening, I was sitting in front of a camera doing my first interview with Channel 12 News. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah Chen, looked genuinely shocked as I explained what had happened. So you're telling me you went on vacation for 2 weeks, and when you came back, your entire house was gone? She asked. That's exactly what happened. The HOA had an order to demolish a condemned property at 847 Desert View Drive. My address is 843 Desert View Drive. They demolished my home by mistake, and the HOA president refused to take responsibility. Have you been in contact with Patricia Morrison, the HOA president? I spoke to her today. She claimed she followed proper procedure, but when I showed her the condemnation order clearly states 847, not 843, she said it was a typo and closed the door in my face. What are you doing now? I have hired an attorney and filed a lawsuit against the HOA, Patricia Morrison personally, and the demolition company. I'm seeking full compensation for my home and everything in it, plus damages for what they have done to my life. The interview aired on the 10 o'clock news that night. I watched it from a hotel room I had rented, since I obviously had nowhere to live. My phone started ringing immediately after the segment aired. Friends I had not heard from in years calling to express their shock and support, but also reporters from other news outlets wanting interviews. By the next morning, my story had gone viral. It was on the local news, then picked up by national outlets. HOA demolishes wrong house. While owner on vacation was trending on social media. My phone was ringing constantly. Henderson called to tell me that 3 other national news networks wanted interviews and that the publicity was perfect for our case. I did 5 more interviews over the next 2 days. Each time I told the same story, showed the same videos, and expressed the same disbelief that this could happen in America. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive. People were outraged on my behalf. The HOA and Patricia Morrison were being vilified online. On the 3rd day after my return, I received a call from Henderson with interesting news. Derek, Patricia Morrison has hired a lawyer. They want to meet to discuss a settlement. Already? We just filed the lawsuit. They know they have no defense. The publicity is destroying them. Every news outlet in the country is covering this story, and the HOA is being portrayed as incompetent at best, malicious at worst. They want to make this go away quickly. What kind of settlement are they offering? They are starting at $2 million. I laughed bitterly. $2 million? My house alone was worth $600,000. The contents were worth at least another $200,000, and that does not include irreplaceable items or any damages for what they put me through. I told them we would not even consider anything less than $10 million, and that you want a public apology from Patricia Morrison. They said they would get back to us. What about criminal charges? Can we press charges against Patricia? I have been thinking about that. What she did could potentially be charged as criminal destruction of property, but that would be up to the county attorney's office. However, I think we have grounds to request a criminal investigation. The fact that she proceeded despite being told by witnesses that she had the wrong address could be seen as reckless endangerment of property, which is a felony in Arizona. Do it. I want her to face consequences beyond just a lawsuit. Henderson agreed and said he would contact the county attorney's office that afternoon. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the practical aspects of my situation. I had no home and no belongings except what I had taken to Costa Rica. I spent the next several days shopping for basic necessities, clothes, toiletries, a laptop to replace the one that had been demolished with my house. My insurance company was being helpful, but slow. They had sent an adjuster to photograph the empty lot and were processing my claim, but they warned it could take weeks or months to settle. Tom Richardson had been an incredible support. He brought me copies of all the photos he had taken before the demolition, showing what my house had looked like. These would be crucial for the insurance claim and the lawsuit. He also testified in a deposition that Henderson arranged, stating clearly that he had told the demolition crew and Patricia Morrison that they had the wrong address. A week after I had returned from vacation, Henderson called with an update. The county attorney's office has agreed to open a criminal investigation into Patricia Morrison's actions. They are treating it as felony criminal damage. There's also a possibility of fraud charges because she apparently submitted false documentation to the county claiming she had contacted you and received no response. False documentation? Yes. She filed paperwork stating she had sent you certified letters about the violations and demolition and that you refused to accept them. But we checked with the post office, and no certified letters were ever sent to your address. So she committed fraud too. That's what the county attorney is investigating. If they can prove she knowingly submitted false information to obtain authorization for the demolition, that is a serious crime. Good. What about the settlement talks? They have come back with $5 million. I told them we want $10 million plus a public apology, and we are not budging. They are getting desperate because the negative publicity is causing other homeowners in your community to revolt. Apparently, there is a movement to recall the entire HOA board and dissolve the association entirely. This news made me happy in a petty way. I'd always thought the HOA was too powerful and too intrusive. Maybe something good could come from this disaster. 2 days later, I was contacted by a detective from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Detective James Russo wanted to meet with me to discuss the criminal investigation into Patricia Morrison. We met at a coffee shop near my hotel. Detective Russo was a man in his 40s, built like he spent a lot of time at the gym, with a no-nonsense demeanor that I appreciated. Mr. Quinlan, I have been assigned to investigate the demolition of your property. I have reviewed all the evidence you provided to the county attorney's office, and I have some questions. I will tell you anything you need to know, I said. Let's start with your relationship with Ms. Morrison. Had you had conflicts with her before this incident? I explained the history of petty violations and fines, how Patricia seemed to target certain homeowners she did not like, and how she ran the HOA like a dictatorship. Did you ever threaten her or make any statements that could be construed as threatening? No, never. I mostly ignored her. I paid the fines when I thought they were legitimate and contested the ones that were ridiculous. But I never threatened her. Good. Because her lawyer's already trying to paint you as a hostile homeowner who was non-responsive to HOA communications, and they are going to claim this was an unfortunate mistake, not a crime. It's only a mistake if you ignore the fact that she was told repeatedly she had the wrong address and proceeded anyway. That's not a mistake. That is willful destruction. I agree. I watched the videos your neighbor took. What interests me most is the fact that she threatened him when he tried to stop the demolition. That shows consciousness of wrongdoing. She knew there was a problem, but chose to proceed anyway. So what happens now? I'm going to interview Ms. Morrison, the demolition company employees, and anyone else who was present during the demolition. I am also subpoenaing all HOA records related to your property and the property that was supposed to be demolished. If I find evidence of criminal intent, I will present the case to the county attorney and recommend charges. How long will this take? A few weeks, maybe a month. These things move slowly, but I want you to know I am taking this seriously. What happened to you is outrageous, and if laws were broken, the responsible parties will be held accountable. I thanked Detective Russo and left the meeting feeling slightly better. At least the criminal justice system was taking this seriously. Over the next 2 weeks, the case continued to develop. The media coverage remained intense, with new developments reported almost daily. I gave several more interviews, always telling the same story, always expressing my disbelief that this could happen. The HOA finally increased their settlement offer to $8 million, but they still refused to include a public apology from Patricia Morrison. Henderson advised me to hold firm. We were going to trial if necessary, and he was confident we would win far more than $8 million. Then, 3 weeks after I had returned from Costa Rica, Detective Russo called me. Mr. Quinlan, I wanted to give you an update. I've completed my investigation, and I am recommending that the county attorney file felony charges against Patricia Morrison for criminal damage and fraud. What did you find? Several things. First, the demolition company employees all stated that your neighbor told them they had the wrong address and that Ms. Morrison overruled them and insisted they proceed. Second, Ms. Morrison filed false documentation with the county stating she had sent you certified mail when in fact she never did. Third, and this is the big one, we found emails between Ms. Morrison and another HOA board member where she explicitly stated she knew there was confusion about the address but wanted to teach you a lesson for being a problem homeowner. I felt a chill run down my spine. She admitted in writing that she knew she had the wrong address? Not exactly. The emails are somewhat ambiguous, but they show she was aware there were questions about which property was condemned, and she chose to proceed anyway without verifying. Combined with everything else, I believe we have enough for criminal charges. When will charges be filed? The county attorney is reviewing my report now. I expect charges within the next week or two. I called Henderson immediately to tell him the news. He was ecstatic. This changes everything. Once criminal charges are filed, the HOA's insurance company is going to force them to settle. They will not want to be associated with a criminal case. I bet we get a settlement offer of $10 million or more within days of the charges being announced. He was right. 4 days later, Patricia Morrison was arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony criminal damage and 1 count of fraud. The arrest was covered by every major news outlet. The footage of Patricia Morrison being led out of her house in handcuffs was shown on the evening news across the country. The next day, Henderson received a call from the HOA's attorney. They were offering $12 million to settle the lawsuit, plus a public apology from Patricia Morrison and the resignation of the entire HOA board. "Do we take it?" I asked Henderson. "That's up to you. I think we could get more if we go to trial, but trials are unpredictable. $12 million is a substantial amount. It will fully compensate you for your house and contents, plus significant damages for what you have been through." I thought about it for a long time. $12 million was more money than I ever thought I would see in my lifetime. It would allow me to rebuild my house exactly as it was, replace as much as I could of what was lost, and still have enough left over to never work again if I chose. Whoa. What about Patricia Morrison's public apology? What would that look like? They are proposing a written statement that would be published in the local newspaper and read at a community meeting. She would have to admit she made a serious error, apologize for the destruction of your property, and take full responsibility. I want her to apologize in person, to my face, not just a written statement. Henderson made the call and negotiated. After some back and forth, they agreed. Patricia Morrison would apologize to me in person in front of witnesses, and the apology would be recorded and made public. We accepted the settlement. The apology was scheduled for the following week at the law offices of Henderson and Associates. I arrived early, nervous despite knowing I had won. Patricia Morrison arrived with her lawyer, looking defeated. Gone was the arrogant woman who had closed the door in my face. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past month. We sat across from each other at a conference table. Henderson had arranged for a videographer to record the apology. Patricia's lawyer nodded to her, and she began speaking. "Mr. Quinlan, I owe you a sincere apology for what happened to your home. As president of the Sunset Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, it was my responsibility to ensure that any actions taken by the HOA were accurate and appropriate. I failed in that responsibility. I authorized the demolition of your property at 843 Desert View Drive when the condemnation order was for 847 Desert View Drive. I was told by witnesses that there might be an error, and I did not take the time to verify the correct address. As a result, your home was demolished and you lost everything you owned. There is no excuse for what happened. I take full responsibility for this error, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and loss I have caused you." She looked at me, and I could see tears in her eyes. I did not feel sympathy for her. I felt nothing but anger and a sense of justice finally being served. "Is there anything else you want to say?" I asked. "I hope someday you can forgive me, though I know I do not deserve it." "I will never forgive you," I said calmly. "You destroyed 15 years of my life because you were too arrogant to admit you might be wrong. You threatened my neighbor when he tried to stop you. You lied to the county about sending me notices, and worst of all, you did it knowing there was a question about the address. You wanted to teach me a lesson for being a problem homeowner, and instead you destroyed everything I owned. So no, I will never forgive you, but I accept your apology as part of the settlement agreement." Patricia Morrison left the office without another word. I never saw her again. The settlement money came through 2 weeks later, $12 million, deposited into an account Henderson set up for me. After his 30% and various legal fees, I was left with just over $8 million. I immediately hired an architect and a builder to reconstruct my house. I gave them every photo Tom had taken, every video, every memory I could recall, and asked them to rebuild it exactly as it had been. The construction took 8 months, but when it was finished, it looked almost identical to the home I had lost. Of course, it was not the same. The new walls did not have the marks where my father had measured my height every year as a child. The new floors did not creak in the same places. The new paint did not have the patina of 15 years of life lived, but it was home again. I used some of the settlement money to try to replace what had been lost. I scoured estate sales and online auctions for records like the ones my father had collected. I found some of the same albums, though they were not the same copies he had owned. I had old family photos restored from digital scans my cousin had made years ago. They were not the originals, but they were something. The criminal case against Patricia Morrison proceeded separately from the civil settlement. She ultimately pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony criminal damage and 1 count of fraud. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, though the judge suspended all but 6 months of the sentence. She served 6 months in county jail and was released on probation. The HOA board resigned as part of the settlement, and the homeowners of Sunset Ridge Estates voted to dramatically limit the HOA's powers. No longer could they impose fines without a hearing. No longer could they take enforcement actions without multiple levels of verification. The new bylaws were designed to prevent anyone from ever wielding the kind of unchecked power Patricia Morrison had enjoyed. The demolition company settled separately with me for $2 million. They admitted they should have verified the address themselves instead of relying solely on Patricia Morrison's authorization. That money went into a trust fund I set up to help other victims of HOA overreach. As for me, I eventually returned to a sense of normalcy, though I was forever changed by the experience. I kept my new job working remotely for a tech company, which allowed me to live comfortably even without touching the settlement money. I became an advocate for HOA reform, giving talks at community meetings and writing articles about the dangers of giving too much power to homeowners associations. Tom Richardson became one of my closest friends. He had stood up for me when no one else would, and I would never forget that. We had dinner together every week, and he loved to tell the story of the day he watched them demolish my house while yelling that they had the wrong address. 3 years after the demolition, I was contacted by a journalist writing a book about HOA abuses. She wanted to feature my story as the centerpiece of a chapter on HOA overreach and the need for reform. I agreed, hoping that by sharing what happened to me, I might prevent it from happening to someone else. The book was published a year later and became a bestseller. My story resonated with people across the country who had their own experiences with overzealous HOAs. Several states passed laws limiting HOA powers in the wake of the book's publication. Arizona passed the Quinlan Act, which required multiple levels of verification before any HOA could take destructive action against a property. I testified before the state legislature in support of the bill, telling my story to lawmakers who listened with expressions of shock and sympathy. When the bill passed unanimously, I felt a sense of closure I had not expected. Something good had come from the worst experience of my life. The empty lot at 847 Desert View Drive, the property that was actually supposed to be demolished, remained empty for 2 years after my house was destroyed. Eventually, the owner cleared the title issues and sold the lot to a developer who built a new home there. Every time I drove past it, I thought about the absurdity of the situation. That house should have been demolished, but instead mine was destroyed. I also thought about the fragility of our possessions and our sense of security. I'd always believed that my home was my castle, that I was protected by property rights and the rule of law. The demolition of my house shattered that illusion. I learned that mistakes can happen, that bureaucracy can fail, and that people in positions of power can abuse that power with devastating consequences. But I also learned about resilience, about the importance of fighting for justice, and about the power of community support. The outpouring of sympathy I received from strangers around the country, the legal system working to hold Patricia Morrison accountable, the legislative changes that came from my advocacy, all of these restored my faith that justice, while sometimes slow, does eventually prevail. 5 years after the demolition, I sold my rebuilt house. It had never felt quite right, and I was ready for a fresh start. I bought a condo in downtown Phoenix in a building with no HOA, just a simple management company that handled maintenance. I vowed never to live in an HOA community again. With the money from the sale and the settlement funds I had invested wisely, I was financially secure for life. I quit my job and dedicated myself full-time to HOA reform advocacy. I founded a nonprofit organization called the Homeowners Rights Foundation, which provides free legal assistance to people facing HOA abuses. We have helped hundreds of homeowners fight back against unreasonable fines, foreclosures, and other HOA overreach. Every time we win a case, I think about my demolished house and feel that something positive has come from that nightmare. Patricia Morrison, for her part, faded into obscurity after her release from jail. She moved out of Arizona entirely, and I heard through the grapevine that she was living in a small town in Oregon. I do not know what she does now, and I do not care. She is a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked and arrogance overrides common sense. The last time I drove past 843 Desert View Drive, the new owners had painted the house a cheerful yellow and planted roses in the front yard. It looked nothing like my old home, and that was probably for the best. The past was gone, demolished as surely as my house had been. But I had built a new life from the rubble, one focused on helping others and preventing the kind of injustice I had suffered. And in the end, that was worth more than any house could ever be. I still take vacations, but now I leave detailed contact information with multiple people and check my phone regularly, even when I'm supposed to be relaxing. I will never again come home to find my life demolished because I was unreachable for 2 weeks. The experience taught me many lessons, but the most important was this: homes can be rebuilt, possessions can be replaced, but justice requires vigilance and the willingness to fight for what is right. I fought, I won, and I used that victory to help others fight their own battles. And every time someone tells me their HOA horror story, I listen with understanding and offer the resources to fight back. Because no one should ever come home from vacation to find their house demolished because someone in power could not be bothered to verify an address. That is my story, the story of how the HOA demolished the wrong home entirely while I was on vacation for 2 weeks, and how I fought back to get justice and create meaningful change. It was the worst experience of my life, but it also became the catalyst for the most meaningful work I have ever done. And in that sense, though I would never wish it on anyone, I am grateful for what I learned and the opportunity to help others that came from my loss.